Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, we are interviewing Amber Booth McCoy in our third part of our three-part series with her. Today, we're going to be discussing our dark American history, reparations, and the path to dismantling racism. I'm going to go ahead and add her onto the conversation here in just a moment. All right. What's up, Rajan? Manika, nice to see all of you. Amber should be joining in just a moment. We got a list of questions for her that I'm super excited to ask, and also a lot of research and notes that have been taken in preparation for this session. So really excited to have this forum and be able to ask Amber questions. Just waiting on her to join. There she is.
Hello.
Amber, what's up? How are you?
I am good. How are you?
Doing super well. I'm super excited for this session. I was just telling the folks that just joined the room. It's an honor and privilege to be hosting you again. I love the passion that you bring to your craft. You know, a lot of the private conversations that we've had. It's amazing how much you care about this topic and how important and close to the heart this is for you. So I'd love to be in this spot interviewing you. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. So for folks that are just joining in for the first time, maybe haven't had an opportunity to check out our prior interviews with Amber. Amber Booth McCoy is a DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion expert specialist, has spoken at some of the biggest companies, household names here in the United States. She's CEO of the Diversity Booth, which helps facilitate culture, inclusivity, and equity here in America. So thank you. And of course, that's just a short list of accomplishments. We could go on and on, but thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. And to all those who are logged on, if you don't already, you need to go buy the Ally Box. Okay, so you can support.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess real quick, you know, the Ally Box was founded by myself and my co-founder, Zishan, and we sort of put together products by Black-owned, female-founded businesses and market our retail gift box to major corporate conglomerates around the country. So really excited for this discussion today. You know, as part of our sort of education aspect of the company, and Amber Booth McCoy is one of the experts in our country to be talking about this subject. So I can't wait to dive in. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. And I guess with that said, we'll just go ahead and dive straight into the discussion.
All right.
So I know we wanted to cover a brief sort of history recap, and I had asked the question for you to cover, you know, how was the way land distributed amongst Americans, the way citizens were counted, and redlining affect the current wealth gap. But we know that the story is much larger than that, and it starts from much earlier. So if you could begin with giving us a brief history lesson, that'd be awesome.
A brief history lesson on the systemic barriers that got us to where we are today. I will do my best.
Yeah.
After the abolition of slavery, there were free blacks. In fact, they were, even in Arkansas, they were able to join the legislature. They were able to vote as far as black men and such. But then white supremacy reared its ugly head and took away those rights, which meant that they could enact laws and that people who looked like me were unable to affect the laws that were affecting them, right? The government in the, 1930s had a program called redlining, where they literally just did not allow black people to buy homes in certain areas. And they valued their properties at lower values. And you can take a map and look at those neighborhoods in cities today and where those red lines were. And those neighborhoods are still often low or undervalued. But again, that's just a brief. When it comes to mass incarceration, well, after the abolition of slavery, well, then they needed a reason to be able to put you back in slavery, which when they enacted, if you were committed a crime, then you could go back, then they could take you back to be enslaved. And other than that, anytime that there have been major gains, whether we're looking at Seneca Park, Rosewood, Florida, Um, Elaine here in Arkansas, Tulsa, Oklahoma, anytime that there have been significant gains where Black people were self-sufficient and were thriving, white rage has burned those places down. And so I think current statistics say things like that the average Black family is about 200 years behind the average white family. And the argument would be that, you know, Blacks are that's behind because they're lazy, right? But generational wealth is really what that speaks to. I'm sure that many of us either that we may or we know someone who lives in a home that was their parents' home. Maybe it was their parents' home, right? So if you think about even just, like I said, the state that I'm in, Arkansas expelled free Blacks from Arkansas in like 1859 or something like that, right? Now, mind you, they said, listen, we want all free Blacks to go. Doesn't matter if you're a business owner, a landowner, whatever, you have until January 1st to get out of Arkansas, or we're going to put you back into slavery. Wow. Now, these people, if you're trying to sell your land, would you buy from someone if you could just take it from them on January 1st? No, you wouldn't. So these Blacks that fled, which were actually refugees from Arkansas, fled Arkansas. When they came back, it's not like those white individuals gave them those homes and properties and businesses back, right? So when it comes to passing things down, this is why we are behind when it comes to generational wealth, things like that.
I run a small money blog, and I remember I attended a real estate tax webinar recently, and I found out about how essentially the expert there was recommending that folks not sell their real estate and allow it to be passed down through generation, and how that gives immense tax benefits. And so could you touch on, I know in private we had talked about the four mules story, which I hadn't heard before. And if you could touch on that and talk about, kind of dive deeper into how that land was distributed at that time.
So 40 acres and a mule. The mule came later, I will tell you. It was just 40 acres. So after slavery was abolished, there were Black individuals and leaders in the Black community that submitted, if you will, 3 concessions that they wanted to be, given. One of which was that it was somewhere around the area of like South Carolina, Blacks would rule and govern themselves, and whites would not be allowed unless they were soldiers guarding the place. Additionally, they would be given a certain amount of land for each, enslaved person that was for each person that was enslaved or family that was enslaved, and they were able to do so. And it could be, the goal was that it would be near a body of water to ensure, things such as agriculture and things like that. And there was a third concession that I can't remember off the top of my head, but the mule came later, and it, as you know, is Spike Lee's production company, but it's often just a colloquialism that is used in the Black community, simply speaking to the fact that we may feel that we're owed because of things like the Black tax. And that's just simply things that cost more because we are Black.
So when you say things like white supremacy is a big factor in why the Black community kind of is facing the issues that they face today. Could you elaborate on that? I know we spoke about it in private.
White supremacy is supposed to be this veil, right? It's this veil, it's this air that makes whiteness the norm, and anything outside of that should fit into this structure. And anytime one culture is asking a people to fit into theirs, to basically negate theirs, it's called assimilation, and assimilation is a form of racism, discrimination. So when we think about even just, we talked about windows and mirrors, I think in our last session and what that looks like. You just think about production companies. The reason it's huge that Tyler Perry has a production company and that Oprah has a station is because this is media that we can control. Outside of that, all the stories that may be stories of the Black diaspora are not being told by the Black diaspora, right? Not completely and totally, not having control over our own narratives. I forgot what I was answering.
It's okay. I was talking about white supremacy.
White supremacy. Oh, and then it's the little bitty things. White supremacy is the fact that I think this Band-Aid is amazing. Can you see this Band-Aid? Right? It looks like me. Now, I didn't really necessarily pay attention to the fact that Band-Aids were supposed to be flesh colored because it wasn't my flesh color, right? Or when I go shopping and there are these things called nude and I look really dumb in the color nude.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day I decided to look it up, and the definition said for pale or beige skin. Right? Now, do I think that the person that created this very cool clothing concept said, I'm going to leave out 3/4 of the world?
Right.
No. But we often make things in our image. And if the power is seated with typically white males, right, or the wealthy and affluent whites, then they're going to make things in their image, and everyone else has to fit into what that looks like. From the way that we decide our hair, right? There's actual legislation in California called the Crown Act, so that I can wear my hair the way it grows out of my scalp. That's white supremacy. That is just white supremacy white supremacy was the only uncontested ballot on this year's presidential election, or last year's presidential election.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the land of opportunity. We have millions and millions of people here in this country, intelligent, innovative, leadership ability, and you mean to tell me 2 old 70-year-old white men is the best that we have to offer for the country? White supremacy is the only uncontested person on the ballot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. It is the norm. It is whiteness deals with group size, group power, group appearance, and size, power, and privilege. Now, if I were to line up a white man from the U.S., a white man from South Africa, a white man from Australia, and a white man from Europe, and I stand them up here, what do you see? You see white men.
Right.
You see white men. Nobody's going, oh, he looks really South Asian.
Right.
South African, right? No, nobody's doing that, right? So it doesn't matter on what soil those white men are. They're going to be afforded certain benefits simply because of that skin.
Mm-hmm.
That is the protection of white supremacy. Whereas on the flip side, I don't have that protection. Even you don't have that protection. While all hate and discrimination in all forms are wrong, they're not experienced equally. And anti-Blackness, which is the exact opposite of white supremacy must protect itself. You know how they always say, like in the casino, the house will always protect, the house always wins?
Right.
That's exactly what white supremacy seeks to do when it wants to erase history, not allow the 1619 Project to be told, to make trivial things such as Black Lives Matter, to turn that into a political ideology when it is simply individuals on this soil and around the globe, not even asking for you to just give a whole damn, okay? Matter is about this far down, right? That's not, matter is, it's below love, it's below care, it's below it matters. The definition,
right.
The definition of the word matter literally means to be a subject for consideration. There is a population of people asking for their lives to be a subject for consideration, and it's being met with opposition. That is anti-Blackness and white supremacy.
Appreciate that elaborate response. I know that I want to ask more questions about that, but I know we have more questions here, and we've actually got a bunch of comments here here in the chat. And I know we want to keep a Q&A period. So quickly, I just want to say, everyone that's watching, thank you so much for joining us. If you could share this live with other folks that may be interested in the subject right now, they can tune in and ask questions as we move on. There is a question box down here at the bottom. If you just click that bubble with the question on it, you can actually ask a question in that box, and then it'll appear on my screen. But I'm going to go back, because I did see kind of one question come in the middle of your response there, Amber. And that was, let's see here, the black tax. Could you elaborate on that, please? And what year did it occur, and what did it apply to?
The black tax does not speak to an actual tax for the most part. It's the things that cost more, or the consequences that come along, or not even consequences. It is the, and It's a tax we pay, whether it is when you think about being pulled over, right? So as a Black person, I am more likely to be pulled over than a white and or Asian person,
Right.
which means that's a speeding ticket, which means that goes on my driving record. Now, I get too many of those just because I've been pulled over while being Black, and my license gets suspended, right? Then you're driving on and down suspended because you still have to work and things like that, right? And it's a slippery slope. You eventually are just paying and paying and paying. That things like that are the Black tax. When recently there was a couple in the news. There was a couple in the news, a Black couple, and they were selling their house, and they got it appraised, and it appraised, for an amount that they were very upset about the amount that it appraised for. It was low. So they had a different appraiser come out where they had their white friend simply posed to be the homeowner.
Right.
And the price went up, or the appraisal went up like $400,000. $400,000. That
Crazy.
is the Black tax. The money that they would have lost, that's that Black tax. It's those things that impede just the ability of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, it's definitely a very expansive, sort of in-depth topic. Even ability to sort of be seen fairly as a candidate for a job, perhaps, is a kind of repercussion of the Black tax, is a consequence of the Black tax, among numerous other things, such as just bare basic equality next to a white counterpart and people of other races.
Or even incarceration, right? I
Absolutely.
mean, if someone has been incarcerated and they have served their time, why would they not get to participate in a democratic, celebration like an election, right? This is something that they should have the ability to do just as a citizen. If they paid their debt,
Right.
Why are we still punishing them or us? Well, that's because it's a way to suppress those same voices. It is a purposeful disenfranchisement of Black people.
Right. Yeah, I rewatched the 13th documentary last night, and also James Baldwin's documentary, and it spoke about how there was slavery, then there was Jim Crow, which is, well, you're free but you're not really free, and then the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and then after that period it was breaking out the handcuffs, right? So putting folks,
war on drugs and separating families,
right.
And even when it comes to education, right now Black women are led into higher education at a rate of about 7 to 1 to their male counterparts. Right. Now, if you can educate them differently, right, then it's possible that Black female will not then see that Black male as an attractive or viable mate because she now has a higher education and he does not, right? Like, it is intentional.
There was, I'm sure folks that are watching may or may not actually, I should say, be familiar with Brian Stevenson, who is the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative. The film last year, Just Mercy, that released with Michael B. Jordan, was based on Brian Stevenson's story of representing a gentleman that was put in jail who was innocent and given life without parole. And I think he actually has a stint in the 13 documentaries. I'm seeing the comments here about a particular state where I think 20 to 30% of folks that have served their time in jail are unable to vote. I forget what state it was exactly, but yeah, I'm seeing the comments here, and that is a big issue, right? We're one of the only countries where folks are punished for a crime, they serve their sentence, and then we make sure that they can't really adjust back to normal life afterwards.
It's purposeful. It's so the recidivism rate looks the way it does because we privatize prisons.
Right. That too. Hopefully California becomes, I've been seeing the news headlines, maybe you come in the first state that sort of tries to fix that issue. But yeah, it's been I encourage everyone to watch the 13th documentary and also James Baldwin's documentary as well. In preparation for this talk, actually, I watched a lot of clips because I know my cousin here, Sonia, thank you for asking this question. Are there serious policy proposals around reparations? So I want to shift the discussion there. And kind of in preparation to talk about this subject, I watched a lot of clips from conservative commentators kind of offering their opinion on why there shouldn't be reparations. And one of them that I wanted to throw at you initially, or actually, How about if you could talk about what reparations are, what the case is, and then I could present some of the thoughts from conservative commentators, and maybe you could respond to those. I think that'd be amazing.
Sure. So reparations, first and foremost, we have to look and listen to the word. It means to repair. So it would be the government acknowledging that it had placed and has and continues to place systemic barriers that basically impede the ability of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for Black individuals. Even if, whether you're talking about, from chattel slavery to Jim Crow, or even when it comes to the school districts, right? Black and brown school districts are severely underfunded next to their majority white counterparts. So it's things like that, like there are more food deserts in Black and brown neighborhoods. I mean,
100%.
access to healthy food is huge when we're talking about, especially a country where typically 50% of the population has cancer at some point in time in their life. And these people are unable to eat healthy, but also unable to advocate for themselves because maybe they have lost their voting rights. So who is speaking up for them? So reparations is the idea that you're able to begin working towards a racially equitable society. And there are some policies that, if I'm gonna be honest, when Elizabeth Warren was running, I kind of liked her policy. I mean, it was robust. There are several different ways. In fact, President Biden is also forming a coalition on reparations at the moment. And so, of course, there's been lots of news about that in the headlines. But that is what it would do. It would take the descendants of those who were enslaved, for the most part, anyone of African ancestry, unless you migrated here after. And it would offer them certain concessions. One of which that I think would be like, when I think about what my reparations wish list would be, would look like, free college and the removal of student loan debt for Black Americans. So, I mean, there's still going to be bias around lending because implicit bias is real and it plays a part in everything from healthcare to criminal justice to the educational system. So removing things like school debt and allowing college to be free allows for some type of equity. It's not going to be right away, but generationally, yes, I definitely think that could assist in closing the divide a little bit.
My cousin here is in the comments. Sorry, yeah, I think she's worked with Elizabeth Warren's campaign, if I remember correctly. She's hyped right now. I want to just quickly touch on some background in terms of reparations and in terms of other groups of folks who have received reparations before, just so people understand.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Literally, the U.S. is fine with reparations as long as it's not Black people.
Right.
We have paid reparations to the Japanese that were placed in internment camps.
Yep.
We have paid reparations to Native Americans here on the soil. We are still paying for bombing Nagasaki and Hiroshima, still paying money there. The Marshall Islands, we did nuclear testing in and around the Marshall Islands. And then we were like, oops, we didn't realize y'all were over there. And since they had a pretty pescatarian diet and we just put lots of nuclear waste in it and they could not eat Teenage Mutant Ninja Fish, we then, as the U.S. said, you know what, let us repair this. So those who are from the Marshall Islands can come to North Arkansas and whatever those states are adjourning. I'm really bad with geography. I have no idea what states I touch. So you can live in this area. You don't need a green card. You don't need a visa. It is us saying our bad. It's the U.S. saying our bad. Again, everyone. And when people think about models that we could use, Germany paid reparations to victims of the Holocaust. There's models that have already been in place that other countries used and they worked. It literally looked like deposits into bank accounts for descendants and or those impacted by the Holocaust.
So I have a question, a follow-up question to that. So, but first I'll just say, to support your point, Japanese American survivors of internment concentration camps in World War II, Civil Liberties Act of 1988, spearheaded by Japanese Congressman, I believe, Norman Mineta, and it was signed in by Ronald Reagan. $20,000 each to 80,000 internees internment camp sort of attendees. Native Americans, Harry Truman signed Indian Claims Commission in 1946, which lasted until 1978. That was 1.3 billion awarded to 176 tribes and nations. Germany, like you just mentioned, systematic genocide, of course, through the Holocaust of 6 million Jewish people. As of 2012, $89 billion was given to Jewish folks through the German government, German banks, and other financial institutions over the course of 60 plus years. So my question, just kind of going through a lot of, again, of those conservative clips, people like Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens, etc., talking about why reparations shouldn't be given or the complications involved. One of the questions that was, or the rather the points that was raised by Ben Shapiro was the example of sort of, number one, what is the metric that should be used to decide who receives and how much among Black Americans. So he gave the example of President Obama, whose father is not from here, who's not American, and whose mom is white. And then I think he gave the example of Kamala Harris, whose mom is Jamaican, I believe, and then whose mom is Indian. So what are your thoughts on that, and kind of the complications or the complexity of how, if it was money or any concessions in particular, would be given?
First, I'm going to need Ben to stay in his lane, right? Just stay in your lane, because you obviously understand, first and foremost, race is about what you see. No one has ever gone, oh, look, it's the first biracial president. You don't see that headline. That's not what you see. You see the first Black president, right? Right. So because that is how he presents, we know that there is African ancestry in his heritage. He receives the same amount as anyone else, period, point blank. He's not going to be pulled over less because they know his mom is white. He's still going to have the same barriers as anyone else, even if he is biracial, because race is about what people see. Now, the other part of that is tracking it, right? And trying to figure out what that should look like. Well, the thing is, Blacks just started being able to self-select, or race just became something that you self-select in the past few decades. Prior to that, the enumerator came around, looked at you, and decided what you were. So you can say, oh, well, let's go back and do the rolls, and then we can see who all. No, somebody could have looked at my Native American great-great-great-grandmother and said, well, she looks Black, and so that's what you wrote down. But it's inaccurate for my family history. So I don't think that we should say, you know what, it's just going to be too hard, let's just give up. I mean, that seems like, you know, a very easy way out. The issue is that we can continue to not have these conversations. Remember when we were in school and your teacher would tell you to skip the hard question so you can spend more time on it at the end? America has skipped the hard question for way too damn long, and reparations is how we get to a better place. And it's going to the same way the government instituted slavery, the same way the government allowed for Jim Crow, the same way the government allowed for private prisons and mass incarcerations. Fixing it is also, it should be on that same government, period.
I just put up this question by Sonia here. Are there serious policy proposals around reparations? I know how to read it off before. Could you dive a little bit deeper into perhaps what is the kind of the current landscape situation within Congress, or even at the state kind of local level, in terms of reparations, if any? So
there are, and they look different from, you can, and they even have what they call individual reparations, and those are things such as everyday individuals, and particularly those of white ancestry, because first it's an acknowledgement. So on the individual level and at the institutional level, the first thing is to acknowledge the harm done to Black Americans on this soil, period. Right? The lives and lineages lost in the Middle Passage, that is what you're paying for. You're not just paying because, oh, it's so tough to be Black. As I've stated before, I love all this melanin. That doesn't mean that it doesn't come with shoes. You're paying for those things. You're essentially not even paying, you're giving me back all the Black tax that I've paid over the years. That's really what you'd be doing to anyone. But as far as those individual things, you can support causes that are specific to to the edifying, amplifying, and affirming of Black lives. You can support organizations like the Ally Box, since they are being intentional about making sure that they expose Black women's products to a new consumer base. Now, on the larger level, I think that land often comes up, but it's really too. I think that would be more complicated. Aren't you familiar with the court case, that the Supreme Court ruling that they had in Oklahoma recently, where they were trying to have to, the Supreme Court was going to have to decide essentially if they were going to give pretty much 3/4 of Oklahoma back to the Native Americans who lived there.
Uh-huh.
And it all happened because of some soil, basically. Like literally there was a fight over some soil, and then one person, and where someone died. And so the tribe was like, no, we have jurisdiction here. And then the state was like, no, we have jurisdiction here. And then they went, and it became a whole court case where the tribe then learned that they should have all of this land, like literally all of it. And the funniest
I mean, they
part,
should have everything here.
I mean, completely. But like,
yeah.
like literally based upon doctrine, right? The state's argument, Oklahoma State's argument was, oh, no. We know that this is what this document says, but we meant to change it. I kid you not, that was the state's argument, that we meant to change this, and that to take it out of the hands of, Native Americans. Either way, they did just rule on it. But I was following it because, to me, that is what equity and reparations looks like, right? Even though it meant, if they truly give this land back, that, people would have to leave their homes. People would have to leave farms that may be in their home, in their family for generations. Like, let's just say you had a farm and it has been in your family for 5 generations, and then this Supreme Court ruling comes out and says, hey, Muskogee, tribe now owns this land, and you got to go. They would feel like being Black. So being equitable means that you repair stuff even if the lift is too heavy.
Mm-hmm.
So I was saying that to say that land is more difficult, but there are things that you can do that would make significant difference, whether that is allowing for home ownership or programs that are specific to home ownership, and making sure that it is affordable, right? Not the predatory loans that, come with Black tax. Definitely the education, the state, and I say state education, you can't just go to, Princeton free because you want to, but all state universities should most certainly be free for the descendants of enslaved people, in addition to wiping school debt, right? It's something that came up. And there were, clearing the table. I think that coming to the table, they have a very large document. In fact, if we share this video, I will put a link to the video as well so people can read it. It's a very lengthy document on the way they think reparations should just be carried out. And I have a few of them. Let's see. Oh. Now, some of these things are not just about tangible or handing Black people things such as houses and money. It is also about teaching history correctly.
Mm-hmm.
When my son was in the 5th grade, he had a assignment about the Civil War, and the worksheet said that the war was over economic differences.
Wow.
You mean
that's a joke?
you mean the differences over whether you can own a human, like those economic differences?
Right.
So it means you go back and you remove things like that are inaccurate, and you tell history the way it's supposed to. If you're going to talk about the White House, you acknowledge the slaves who did it. If you're going to talk about healthcare, then you don't do so without acknowledging the many, many Black bodies that died on tables just because white doctors said they can't feel pain.
Mm-hmm.
It's the acknowledgement of the past. It is ripping off that ugly Band-Aid, talking about things. That is also reparations. That is a part of racial healing. It is understanding racial equity in a very different way. I am not able to function the same the day after like a Trayvon killing, right? There is a collective grieving that happens with the diaspora when that happens, because it could have been any one of us, especially when you're looking at things like Ahmaud Arbery, right? Where he was jogging in his own home. And then white supremacy and internalized dominance said that he owed them an answer, right?
Right.
So it's things like acknowledging, oh, maybe your company needs to have sick days, vacation days, and black days. That's what I call them. That's what I take black days whenever it gets a little overwhelming. But that is what equity looks like. We're at those times we are grieving differently, and just are. So other things are like we just had the African American Museum launched a few years ago. So those are things that are on the list, making sure that there are more museums. And then I am always an advocate for not showing civil rights pictures in black and white, because it allows people to feel that it was so long ago, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, the
It's a great
King
point.
and the King assassination and the Malcolm assassination, like those happened during my parents' lifetime, you know?
Yeah.
So, and I always tell people when it comes to slavery, like, why do we still have to keep talking about this? Slavery was so long ago. Slavery was 2 grandmas ago. Count that
Yeah.
up. 2
Yeah.
grandmas ago. So yes, we are still like fighting to get to a better place, but that is because the government has purposefully placed roadblocks in a way. And the issue that I have with Candace Owens is that she talks as though Blacks talk like they're victims, and Black people are we have never said that we are victims. What we are is a group of survivors. What we have proven is that Black pride and Black joy will exist inside and separate of white supremacy that blankets, veils, and smothers this nation. So she should really check her facts, because one, Black joy is a form of resistance. Seeing as how I can label all of these things that deal with Black tax and I can still find a way to laugh, that's not victimhood. That's what surviving looks like. And we do it well. She talks about things like the children in the schools that were underperforming, right?
Yes.
Now, whose fault is it that the children is it the child's fault? Because she was placing the onus of that failure on the child, which means her privilege is showing, okay? Because if you look, my city, Little Rock, Arkansas, a few years ago, they closed 5 elementary schools in a very close area. So Black and brown area, they closed 5. Do you think the students disappeared? They didn't. The students didn't actually disappear. So now you're taking students and you're busing them out further.
Yeah.
You're going to bus them to places where they may have been the majority, even as a minority here, and now you're putting them in unfamiliar circumstances. You're putting them in places where they are now subject to racial bias, racial discrimination, and racial prejudice in a way they weren't previously when they were in their own neighborhood.
Right.
You've made their days longer because they have to travel further to get on the bus.
Yeah.
Maybe mom used to be able to pick up, right? Mom used to be able to walk down the street and pick up the baby. Oh, mom doesn't have a car, and she really enjoyed that walking time, but she can't get all the way across there.
Yeah.
It's those things that people don't think about when it comes to equity. The same way they closed those schools and those kids didn't go anywhere, all you did was overcrowd and underfund some other school.
Yeah.
So if she's going to quote stats like this many kids are failing, then you should say that the school district failed them. You should say that the government failed them. You should say that white flight, which is what the issue is, because they're taking money out of public schools because it has less students in it, right? And why does it have less students? Because the white and affluent are getting to go to these charter schools and these private schools.
Yeah.
And then they're simply not funding the public schools the same, right?
Yeah.
That is also white supremacy. You get more white students, you get more money. Oh, not a lot of white students. Oh, got to take the money.
Yeah. Gets deprioritized. Yeah. I watched that documentary about, I think it's called Waiting for Superman. It's extremely devastating and sad, you know, the plight of kids and families that are in some of these Black and Latinx areas, where, again, schools getting shut down, lack of resources, et cetera, which breeds just a multitude of other problems, which is extremely sad. And
you know what? They always talk about crime in those areas, of course, where there's low education, we know.
Yeah.
And so I just a friendly PSA from your favorite diversity specialist. There is no such thing as Black on Black crime. You know why? Because if you've never said the words white on white crime, Asian on Asian crime, Hispanic on Hispanic crime, and you've only said black on black crime, then you must ask yourself why. 80% of white people are killed by other white people, and nobody ever talks about that.
Yeah. Exactly. I remember you highlighted that in our first session. Let's see here. I have, feel free, everyone, to drop in any questions in the question box. Wanted to shift the conversation to kind of one of the last topics that we have before we formally open up to any other questions as well. This is a loaded one, and it's what will it take to achieve an equitable society?
You know, what will it take? It will take everyone. It will take everyone to achieve an equitable society, because very often people will look at situations like us talking about reparations for Black Americans, and somehow there are other individuals, maybe even of other ethnicities and races, that are going, well, that's not fair that they're going to get more money.
Not financially feasible. I had some people tell me that in direct messages promotion this program.
We literally pay billions in defense. We throw money out just away in this country. And you're going to tell me that you can't find, like the former president said, you can't find a couple, a couple million. Now, what it will take, though, seriously, is for people to understand that all oppression is linked, not just the suffering of racism and things such as that nature, but patriarchy is linked to nationalism, is linked to sexism, is linked to monolanguagism. It is
right, the intersectionality.
All, like, no oppression stands alone. So what it will take to reach an equitable society will be everyone understanding that you're not just doing it for someone else, you're doing it for yourself too. If that is not enough motivation for you, that it's the right thing to do in order to, make an equitable society for someone else, then do it selfishly, because making an equitable society still benefits you. When you think about, let's say it is reparations, and you're going to deposit actual money into bank accounts, does that not stimulate the economy?
Mm-hmm.
If you're able to have a population of people who financial aid prevented them from getting higher education, and now you're saying, you know what, you can go to college, come out debt-free, those people can contribute to society differently.
Yeah.
The same people that the news of Fox calls thugs and all of these things, well, you don't have that, because you'll have education. Education assists in mitigating crime. You mitigate crime, you have safer neighborhoods. You have safer neighborhoods, you have higher market values. It benefits everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Not just the Black population or the diaspora in specific, but everyone.
What do you have to say to those people? This is going back a bit. What do you have to say to those people that bring up the pull up by your bootstraps reference? I think the premise of their argument is that I guess one aspect is the kind of given the democratization of access to resources through, say, your smartphone, and you have Google, and you have all these other resources that weren't present before. Some people feel that given that access, even if you're living in a torn down neighborhood with a torn family, you should be able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, quote unquote, and make it. So what do you have to say to those people?
Well, one, those people, their class and privilege are showing. You're assuming that they have bootstraps in the first place. You're assuming they have boots to put those bootstraps on. There has to be a time where we take a look out of our everyday life, the mirrors that we see, and look for those windows, the things that we're not used to seeing, like the people that are like food insecurity. Every single problem that needs to be fixed in society, you can look at it individually, but then you look at it by race, right? That's fine. Okay, well, let's look at hunger in America, but then look at food insecurity by race. Let's look at the problem of education in America. Let's look at the problem then by race, right? Let's look at criminal justice. Good Lord, that's a whole I mean, that's 5 shows right there,
Yeah.
right?
Super
So
interesting topic, by the way. Yeah.
yes. So it is acknowledging that those bootstraps are not only not present in many of those people's lives that they're saying, but that it is the system that needs to be fixed that will require them to have such bootstraps. Okay, so last year, when everything was shut down, and there was a lot of rhetoric and commentary that people wanted to stay home and get unemployment checks, because they would rather stay home and make more money staying home than going to work. First of all, wouldn't everyone like to stay home and make more money at home than you would like, wouldn't that just be the goal? But outside of that, because I really couldn't understand, like, they just want to stay home and make money. Yeah,
Wouldn't you?
Wouldn't you? But the other part is that why would we allow a system where someone can work 40 hours a week and still not make ends meet and make more sitting at home? Be mad at the system that allows it, not the person that is trying to somewhat benefit from it.
Right.
If they have been grinding, they have been trying to get those proverbial bootstraps together, right? And now it just so happens that there's a pandemic and they can stay home and make just a little bit more money. I think they're owed. They are owed just that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't put our focus in the right places. And I think it was President LBJ that said, you can't take a man that has been hobbled for 400 years, unloose his shackles, move him up to the front, and say you're free to race with the rest of them.
Right.
I mean,
further behind.
That's that. Right. I mean, even if you say, oh, no, get right here. Think about a racetrack. When they're going to run around the track, right, they're lined up specifically because of equity, so that everyone has the same distance to go. That is the point of lining them up diagonally. What people are saying is that, oh, equality this. We didn't get the disparities that we have in healthcare, generational wealth, education, criminal justice, and all that by giving equally. And we're not going to fix them by giving equally. Equity is where we give what is needed to whom it is needed. And right now, that is Black and brown populations, the Black and indigenous populations in particular.
Absolutely. I really encourage folks to check out our first and second session because Amber dropped a ton of gems. We dove into a lot of different niche topics, and I know that we wanted to finish up on a few more simple, basic questions that we had talked about yesterday. And so kind of bringing it back to kind of everyday concepts. Amber, you had asked me to bring up the discussion about, what should we call Black people, right?
It's something that comes up all the time, I swear.
Right, and it comes up so frequently in your sessions, and if you could enlighten us, because it is something that I think is a lot of people's minds.
So the fact is, when it comes to deciding what to be called, that's something that was just placed in the hands of Black people, just a little while ago. So yes, it has transitioned from colored to Negro to, like Black, African American. What it is today is it's self-selected. The same way you identify with your preferred pronouns or your pronouns. I'm Black. I'm just regular Black. I don't use African American. So you simply ask. It's okay to ask. The thing is, that's what white supremacy does, right? That is a side effect of white supremacy because it teaches us that we're not supposed to talk about race. If we don't talk about race, then the house gets to protect itself, right? We don't start seeing the cracks and the holes in the wall. Well, it's like it gets whispered, Amber, the Black girl, what's not a secret? That I'm Black. It's not a secret. I actually know that. But we whisper like we're afraid. So just ask someone how they want to be identified.
Yeah.
That's all. Again, I'm just black. Just black, just regular old black.
Yeah. Let's see here. We got a comment here. I honestly don't like African American, although 23andMe says I'm 34% sub-Saharan African. Haha. This is my Black friend here in the chat. Let's see.
My 23andMe said a whole bunch of stuff, and I was actually very I was actually very shocked. I'm not gonna lie. Not gonna lie.
Now you got to tell us.
I so I thought, well, okay,
You're actually
listen.
from India.
I literally was so I swear, all I wanted to know was that there was Asian somewhere, not a not I mean not a drop. And then and and then I definitely had much more European than I had anticipated. And I
Interesting.
blamed it on my mother. Because my mother's maiden name is Polk, and so of course that was a former president's name. So I tease her often, and I told that's why I have so much European ancestry of my 23andMe. But outside of that, it definitely said, was it, I mean, Cameroon and all of these other places. So,
Okay. Which I'm sure you expected.
I also, right. Well, I also really, for whatever reason, want to be from Eritrea.
Okay.
I just think that's pretty cool. A whole population of people that, kind of like Italian and Black that have just, I mean, come on. You know what I learned this week? I learned why fish and spaghetti is cooked together. Do you want to know? You want to know?
Tell me.
Okay. Well, in the South, it is a thing. If you cook spaghetti, you cook fish. Well, when early in the 1900s, Blacks and Italians were poor, and so they would often trade or sell goods with each other very often. And so, of course, fish being a Black, staple, and Italian being, spaghetti being an Italian staple, this was a sign of unity. And so, even though those populations have, somewhat diverged, also due to white supremacy, because if you isolate the Black individual, you can let everyone else ascribe to white. But so this is why it's still cooked in the South, and why I can't even imagine having fish without spaghetti. But that's why.
Wow, that is a really cool story. You conduct a lot of these sessions around the country. Are there any other sort of very common questions that you get that you'd like to share responses to at this time?
People often want to discuss Black Lives Matter. And it's because maybe they have an affinity or a family member that is a police officer, right? So that comes up a lot when they like Blue Lives Matter. So I just want to be abundantly clear that if you are not an avatar and you are not a Smurf, there is no such thing as a blue life, period. That's a uniform. And essentially you are disrespecting the lives and lived experiences, past and present, of Black lives to compare such.
Mm-hmm.
There are Black and brown police officers, and when they take off that blue uniform, they talk about being pulled over just the same.
Yeah.
So if blue lives, right, were that strong, then they would know automatically that they're just blue. But no, only avatars and Smurfs have blue lives. That's it. The other thing is that I would encourage people that what comes up a lot, and there is a video on my YouTube page, but it comes up a lot that people want to say something when tragedy happens and they don't know what to say. You don't have to know all the right words. Sometimes it's just checking in. It's just being intentional about the conversation. And then the last thing I'll say is that having a vegetable tray at a dinner party is not acceptable just because you feel someone is vegan. If you're going to be intentional about a dinner party, ask for dinner restrictions or dietary restrictions, and then have something other than a veggie tray. It's just rude to invite people. It's like an uninvite invite when you do that. Like, oh, they shouldn't be vegan. No, you shouldn't have invited me to a dinner party and not have food.
That's a good one. That's funny. We have some comments here. Oh yeah, Layla said, I've been in the South 6 years and I still understand the meal combo. Lol. Arjun said,
but
yeah.
But it's good though, right? But it's good, right?
Arjun said, yeah, Blacks, Greeks, Italians, and Jews were all discriminated against in the early 1900s, and sadly, it's continued.
Jews were Black. Italians were Black. They were literally considered, well, Jews got on a train, and by the time they got to the other end of the country, they were not Black anymore. But Italians definitely. In fact, there's a really interesting book called When the Italians Were Black that if you're interested, you should check out.
Hell yeah. Everybody go buy that book. We're going to check that out. We're going to, I have one last question, but folks, we're going to wrap up right here within the next like 10 minutes. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the question box now so we can tackle them, or Amber can tackle them rather.
And then after that, they'll have to get ready to start coming to our clubhouse.
That's right. Oh yeah, we want to talk about that. So Amber and I are going to team up on Clubhouse and take the app by storm. We're going to have some discussions in late March is what we're planning for right now.
Discussions in Clubhouse karaoke. No,
yeah. Why not? So we're gonna do that, and so you'll be able to kind of join a live conversation about some of these topics as opposed to kind of just the Instagram format. So really looking forward to that. My last question here was similar to the prior one, but a lot of us here are maybe young adults, but maybe not married yet, singles, etc. And when I start thinking about this topic and I start thinking about my children and the world that I want them to grow up in, and parenting and things like that, maybe that process starts for me maybe within the next 10 years. How can we empower our children, both our white children and children of color, to work towards a more equitable society? What can we teach them? What kind of models should we be exhibiting to ensure that the world, our world, our society here in America is a better one 10, 20, 30 years from now?
So as a mother of Black sons, I have to think about their every daily movement differently, right? I mean, since the time my youngest, is my biological, right? And so I was a single mom for 11 years, and there were tough conversations I had to have with him about who he is and how he presented and what comes with that identity. I remember probably the first one was maybe third or fourth grade. So on the flip side, if my son is young enough to, experience racism, then the white sons are young enough to learn about it, mm-hmm. and to learn about it honestly. So I think that the way we empower them, because the work has to be done differently. What racial equity and allyship looks like in the non-Black and non, persons of color is a different thing. One, there has to be a whole reckoning with privilege, being able to understand what privilege is. A lot of times there is, of course, fragility, because people hear white privilege and feel that someone's saying that they didn't work for whatever it is that they have achieved, when that is not at all what is being said. It's simply saying that as you are working for those things, your race didn't impede you in any way. That's right. All it says. Mm-hmm. So I think it's acknowledging that there are opportunities in the everyday lives of children to address those things. If you have a white child in the home and you see a stereotypical, caricature on TV, address that. Say, you know what, that is not a good representation or something. Don't just allow those things to persist. Additionally, don't shush them. So this whole whispering of race thing, it was the white girl. That's because we're shushed when we're younger, right? Don't say that. Don't say that. Allow children to see and say color. How in the heck are we going to fix stuff we're not willing to see? Right. So it's okay to see it. And for those Black boys and girls and non-binary, those lives, those are different. That means that when it comes to racial equity, we're going to have to acknowledge the trauma that is passed down from generation to generation because of the oppression, the systemic racism, the barriers, and then making space for those, mm-hmm. right? Whether that means very much advocating for mental health, especially when it comes to our Black male population, because Black women are more likely to seek mental health. And just basically acknowledging the plight. It has to be done intentionally and with equity. And so in educational K through 12, don't just use February to learn about Black history. Yeah. Black history is American history. Absolutely. It's February is just for the highlight reel, Right. It's something that you should learn. The things that you read. I can't recall in all my years of AP reading anybody other than Langston Hughes. And there are other Black writers besides Langston Hughes,
Yeah.
right? There should very much be a curriculum that reflects the population that, that they're trying to teach.
Right.
So there are several things that you can do at the age of like K through 12 that would assist in making a better tomorrow. And the other part of that is remembering that the war is fought, or wars are, what is it, old men talking and young people fighting. Well, keep passing down the fight.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite signs at the most recent protests last year, there was like this very old white woman. She had a sign that said, "I'm 80 years old and I can't believe I'm still having to protest this, you know what."
Yeah.
I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be holding that sign, but that means that a lot of uncomfortable conversations have to be had.
Yeah.
And what's frustrating about that is that people don't want to have uncomfortable conversations, but Black and Indigenous and people of color are uncomfortable a lot in white spaces. So just being able to call a spade, be honest, be transparent, take up space so that your children can see you take up space. It's the last example I give. My son and I were walking up, it's called Pinnacle Mountain here in Arkansas. And we got to the top of the mountain and we were just sitting out because we were so tired. And he was like, "Oh, I gotta go. I gotta get up, Mom. I'm gonna get black. I'm gonna get dark." And I was like, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
like anti-blackness at 7, right? That's what that was. He was already being programmed by something that the darker he was, the less attractive he was. And I took that moment to talk to my son about his skin, about how beautiful his skin was. I didn't shush myself because there were white people standing around me or other people that were listening to this conversation. My son had a right to hear that he is beautiful. He has the right to feel pride, and he has the right to get as dark as he wants. So being mindful of all of those things to make a better tomorrow, but it will inevitably take the work of everyone.
I absolutely love that example that you gave. I kind of went through something similar and kind of was and as you referenced before, all Black and brown folks are as far as colorism is concerned, it's kind of like a uniting kind of plight. One of like the leading South Asian male actors in Bollywood in India was endorsing it was called Imami Fair and Handsome. And it had like a darker skinned person on the front, and then the other half was light, and it showed like if you use this for multiple weeks, you'll get lighter. And I remember my grandma in India would talk about the color of my skin because my sister's skin, her skin, and my mom's skin are all much lighter than mine. And I began getting like super insecure about it. This is honestly like the insecurity is like, it's somewhere still very, very deep inside me, but like in recent years, I totally let go of it. But it lasted for a long time. I mean, all throughout college, even if I never shared it with anyone, it really kind of tugged at my core. This is like in 8th grade, and I had the little bottle in my high school locker. And I remember like one of my friends laughing at me for having it. And it was, it's real, and it affects kind of how you navigate daily life. And that's just scratching the surface, right? I went to a private school and just imagine, if you have a kid, here in South Central Los Angeles, whose dad perhaps is unfairly incarcerated, who has a single mom in a rough neighborhood with all sorts of violence and this and that, as opposed to me living out here in one of the richest neighborhoods here in Los Angeles. It's a totally different experience, right? And you just imagine all these factors compounding on each other. How can you tell someone to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, right?
I mean, like, where are these bootstraps, right? I mean, like, I will say colorism. I was probably 18 before I began to like this skin tone. Like, just being teased growing up, of course, for being dark. And, you had to be either Halle Berry or like Vanessa Williams skin tone to be considered beautiful. And at 18, I wrote one of my favorite poems. It was called My Complexion. And it was the first time that I had fallen in, because I've always been in love with Black people and Black history and Black heritage. But my skin tone was, I was always teased or judged for this. Or I remember it so clearly. There was this boy in the 5th grade, and every time the teacher would turn off the lights for a movie, they were like, "Oh, Amber disappeared again." Every time. Every single time. And so like those were definitely things that stuck with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when I
Yeah.
took years later, when I took the Harvard Implicit Association test, they have one for skin tone, and it said at the time that I had a preference for lighter skin. And I was so upset about that because I just knew that I had already unlearned and broken all of
Yeah.
that. So I did eventually, of course, do the work that was necessary to get to no preference, but it
Yeah.
definitely took a lot of work on my end to get there.
So you took this
But
test
that's
and it
unlearning.
recommended, did the test like results when you were viewing them, did the body recommend certain steps to take?
No, no, no. So the Harvard Implicit Association tests are tests that they have been taking since the 90s so that they can assist you in gauging your, if you will, if you had an automatic association for something. So for instance, they have one for race, and it's black, white, of course, and it will tell you whether you have a strong, moderate, or slight preference for whichever of the places that you want. Like after you go through a series of tests.
Yeah.
Now, when I took and the goal is to get to no preference, like that is the ultimate goal, like as a person, as a diversity specialist, all that. Um, when I took the black, white one, it said that I had a moderate preference for the black face. And that's significant because only 5% of the world comes up with that result, regardless of their own race,
Wow.
ethnicity, geographic location, educational level, family stat, you name it, because there is such a bias, just not just even when it comes to the people, but even the color, like the things you're supposed to stay away from on Halloween and all of the things, again, that we
Mm.
ask a whole population of people to identify with and then don't ascribe anything good to it, all right? Um, I took it for light skin, dark skin at the time. Like I said, it said I had a moderate preference for lighter skin. And those things come out in hiring practices. So
Yeah.
I took several of these tests in the second year of this camp that I have at my institution. And I went back and I looked at my staff from the first year. Over 80% of my staff was lighter than me. And I know that I didn't throw out the resumes of dark skinned individuals, but there was a script running in the
Yeah.
back of my head at the time that I didn't know.
Yeah.
After taking the Harvard Implicit Association test, then I was able to do work to change that outlook and to change those ideals and to unpack and de-bias myself. So those are things that you'd actually just have to then follow your favorite diversity specialist, and then I can
Hey.
assist you with
Quick plug.
tips and
I love
tools on
it.
how to de-bias yourself.
Love it, love it. I had, so this is a fun question. Last question. I was watching the documentaries last night. We're seeing all these heroes: James Baldwin, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. In 30, 40 years, who do you think? Who are the leaders that we're going to look back upon? The black leaders, and say that these are the folks that helped us move past kind of the current plight that Black Americans are experiencing. Do you think that it's President Obama or was President Obama? That's a really controversial topic. Do you think it's perhaps someone else, Van Jones? I mean, who do you think, or whose names are going to be mentioned? Just fun, just
You
a fun
know,
question I had. I was
right?
just curious.
Yeah. So I am going to go with what I hope. How about this? This is what I hope. I hope that when we look back, we will finally be able to highlight and celebrate Black women that have dedicated their lives to this cause. When you talk about the civil rights movement, it's always Malcolm, Martin, Mandela, right? But Black women organized, and Black women said, listen, we're tired of being treated like this. We're tired of our mates being treated like this. And they started that movement, the LGBTQ plus movement, like started by Black women. That I guarantee you think about white men when you think about, the LGBTQ plus movement. So I hope that we look back and we hear things about Stacey Abrams. I hope that we look
Yeah.
back and we reference Michelle Obama. I
Okay.
hope that we look back and one day they'll be like, man, Amber Booth McCoy, she was
Hey,
really
I
out
was
there
hoping for
working for
that
the cause.
response. Yeah, I was giving you, that was an alley oop right there. I was giving you an assist real quick. Boom, there we go.
So yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, I think Angela Davis came up in the
I got to
documentary.
meet her.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully,
Mhm.
yeah, hopefully, her work becomes even more mainstream than it has, and we're able to. Stacey Abrams. I mean, I'm reading her book right now. Everyone should be
It
thanking
you
her.
and read Audre Lorde's books. Like that poetry is so it's prolific and it's poignant and it's timeless and it's honest and it is, to me, I mean, people hear me say it a lot, but the reason that I talk about Black women and amplifying those voices is because they experience the combination of patriarchy and racism.
Yeah.
And the two are never separate. So hearing that experience is different than listening to Malcolm or Martin's experience because they had the benefit of patriarchy, right?
Yeah.
So I advocate for reading Audre Lorde as well as the book White Rage, and then definitely anything by Angela Davis, Zora Neale Hurston. I mean, you name it.
The Diversity Booth YouTube channel, Amber Booth McCoy's Instagram, Twitter, etc. So thank you so much for your time. And it was a 3-part series that, you know, kind of an adventurous journey that we've had together, a lot of conversations and emails and the talks here, obviously. And looking forward to build on this and go into
many more
Clubhouse and you know, making some noise over there and perhaps other platforms as well. So thank you so much for your time, your energy, your passion, the work that you're doing. We love you. I've grown in affinity for, you know, the work that you're doing, you as a person. I'm so lucky to have these conversations with you and you know, create a friendship. So thank you.
Share the Black Joy Challenge. The Diversity Booth is giving away up to $600 in prizes. All you have to do is share a story about your Black joy. Well, not you, obviously, because that would be no, but just share. I mean, share it because it is very, very important. And then, as last thing, the funniest thing I've heard probably in the past few weeks was trying to explain Clubhouse to my mother yesterday. It was tough. So
yeah, it's
more
gonna
Clubhouse
be
to come.
It's gonna be super fun. Yeah, we'll hop on, guys. Late March, we'll post it here, and I'll post on my personal profile as well for our discussion. Everyone can look forward to it there, and then yeah, it'll be super fun. So, thank you again, and hope you have an amazing night, and we will be in touch. Thank you, everyone, for joining, attending, participating, asking questions, comments. You know, you're who we do it for. So, thank you. Have a great night, everyone. See ya.
Hey.